You're listening to HBCU Pulse Radio on SiriusXM Channel 142 HBCU. You're now locked in to HBCU Pulse. We're the #1 outlet for HBCU life, talking about everything that's important to our culture, from on-campus issues to politics and what's trending on the yard. We always keep that same energy. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.
What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and the host of HBCU Pulse Radio here on SiriusXM, in the building for another special edition of the show. On today, we're talking about mass communications, because there's a lot of folks that's disrespecting my degree, man, and we got to talk about it. So I have Arielle Kilgore in the building. She's a North Carolina A&T alumna, and she graduated with a mass comm degree. Arielle, how you doing today?
Doing good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. So we're not talking about sports today. You know, we normally come on, we talk about sports, but I think that this is a very important conversation because, you know, I feel as if, you know, mass communications really gets played with, but I definitely want to explore it because there was an article that came out in Business Insider, amazing publication. I read it all the time. And in Business Insider, they had an article called 12 College Majors That May Limit Your Career Potential. And in the article, they talked to career coaches and counselors that ranked what they considered the worst majors to land a, quote, stable, high-paying job. And communications was number 7. The reason behind communications being number 7 on their 12 most useless majors list is because they say that it's such a common degree. And you have Brittany Doe, who's a career coach at Arizona State University. She says that she's running into most hiring managers, colleagues, and friends who really struggle to communicate the value of a communication degree. And just to note, number 1 is acting and theater arts on the list. Number 2 is film. Number 3 is anthropology. Number 4 is civilization studies. Number 5 is philosophy. 6, psychology. 7 is communications. 8 is English. 9 is history. 10 is interior design. 11 is marketing. And 12 is photography. Very interesting list, to say the least. So Arielle, so what's your reaction to seeing Business Insider with this article rank communications as the number 7 most useless degree out of 12 in college?
Well, let me just say, I do love Business Insider. Like when I used to work in nonprofit, we used a lot of them for like code cards and stuff. So they are really knowledgeable in certain articles. But to me, this list is kind of backwards. In this case, you know, communications, maybe back then it was worthless, but now it's so broad. You can do anything. You can do public relations, you can do social media, you can do just different stuff. So I don't really think as a whole, like if you're just talking about journalism and anchoring and news and stuff, it's more of experience. I can say that, you know, knowing, and that's something that I do, but it being that low on the list, I do not think communications it's not useless. You do it every day. The people that are communicating with you, I'm confused. I don't know why we're so low. I'm glad we're not number 1 or in the top 5, but I think communications is it's pretty important.
It is. I think that's a good point, that communications isn't number 1. Like when I saw this article and I saw the list, I was sort of perplexed by it because I really believe that communication is key to everything that we do. We talk about politics and how it's so polarized now, and that's largely because of communication, communicating facts, combating misinformation. That's what we learn in our media classes. We learn about how to make a headline. We learn how to have journalistic ethics. You know, we learn these different things. So as of right now, if you saw the COVID pandemic, you see what's going on in politics, you even see what's going on in the sports world, as we normally talk about. Those journalistic standards are important. And for us communication professionals, we're the ones that tell the story. So, you know, to see communications on the list at all, although it is sort of low, like you said, I just was sort of like, that doesn't really make sense to me, seeing the fact it's Business Insider and it was written by a writer. This article, it was written by a writer. What was their degree? Was it liberal arts? Like, what was their degree? Like, was it communications? I guess your degree was useless, whoever wrote the article. But I want to talk about our specific experiences, right? So, Arielle, you went to North Carolina A&T. I need you to let me know, like, what was it like at North Carolina A&T in your communications program?
So there are like 3 different subsections that you can do so you'll be a journalism and mass communications major, but underneath that you can do public relations, you can do multimedia, which is what I did, which is behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. So I know how to do both anchor and work the cameras. Then you have mass media, which is mostly production, or you're working upstairs in the control room, or you're working on teleprompter. So doing that, they're all rigorous. So your first year, you're learning everybody's part. You're learning public relations, you're maybe learning law, you're learning how to work a camera, you're learning Premiere Pro, all the Adobe programs. And then after that, you kind of just split up. And they really prepare you with providing mentors, providing mock interviews. They have a lot of guest speakers come in. In my time, we had Jamel Hill. A&T provides you with a lot of access that I didn't think mostly, and that's bad for me to say, I didn't think HBCUs had. It took my mom to tell me that HBCUs and that A&T specifically was accredited for journalism. And then I just literally saw with my own eyes take off. So I'm glad she put me on that path. And I'm glad A&T, despite what other people think, have more resources than what we thought. Like the studio is great. The teachers are great. And there's no reason why you should fail. Literally, there is no reason why you shouldn't come out with a job or anything. But I honestly wouldn't trade that journalism experience for anything, because what A&T gave me and the access I get in jobs now, like, oh, she an A&T grad? Okay, they know what's up. Like, that's how I got my first job. So it pays. I'm not gonna lie. It really does pay to be an Aggie.
So for me at Fort Valley, there's a lot of amazing mass communications alum that I was able to even interface with when I was at Fort Valley that sort of gave me that understanding of like where I can go. Because when you go to a Fort Valley that is in North Carolina A&T, it's a smaller HBCU, and it's not like the schools that you often see promoted in national media often. So for us, we looked at A&T, we looked at FAMU, we looked at Howard, and we saw what you all were doing, and we wanted to do that ourselves. And I know for me as a student leader, I tried to sort of bring that swagger and bring that level of content and connections during my time at Fort Valley. I learned a lot about what it takes to be a media professional from Dr. Booz, from Miss Ellis. I learned how to use Premiere. I was scared to death of Premiere. And so I finally started to use it. Shout out to Mr. Rashid. He was giving me a lot of great stuff, to Raven, Mr. Dickey. Like, we learned how to use the Adobe Suite. We learned how to write in media terms. We learned how to use Premiere. So I came out of Fort Valley learning how to be a media professional in the 21st century. And we didn't even call our degree mass communications anymore. We called it media studies because the goal of it, as Dr. Lee would always tell us, is that we want to develop you all as media professionals holistically. It's not just radio. It's not just TV. It's not just PR. You're going to get all of it so you can be ready for the changing media landscape. And I thought that was great. What has your post-graduation journey been like from North Carolina A&T? Because you graduated in 2021. It's been nearly 2 years at this point. So what has your post-graduation journey been like as far as jobs and careers as a mass comm graduate from A&T?
Well, this year I got inside a studio. Finally, I'm a production assistant at Scripps. So I do their teleprompting. Sometimes I do their scripts, but it was actually hard. It was I did a year and a half without a job. And I basically did me. I did a lot of public relations and I did a lot of social media managing. And it's funny because I'm an English minor and that's number 8 under mass comm, but most of my internships were public relations. So that kind of benefited me. And like I said, A&T gives you different avenues and different experiences for everything. So I did have that, but social media was kind of new to me. So I'm not going to lie, I was kind of discouraged. And I had a little bit of imposter syndrome the past 2 days working my new job, because you can see like the differences in going to a PWI and an HBCU. There were certain programs I've never seen at A&T. Like there are certain we don't have a specific rundown class, like a specific television new class. So that was kind of a learning curve for me for these past 2 days, because I had to hurry up and catch up. You don't really have anybody running teleprompter, which is probably the easiest, but also one of the most significant jobs that you can ever have. So my career has been, being an HBCU student, they try to teach you, try to give us connections, but it's hard because we are at a disparity. They don't have all those teachers and all those classes specifically that they can fit to really catch up and be what these PWI students are learning. So, I kind of felt a year behind. But when I actually got there, I knew more of the production side and what to do than the people that I'm sitting with in my studio. So it's not to say that A&T didn't teach me anything. It was just, everybody has different journeys. And I had to learn that differently. Looking at East Dockery and looking at Gerard Hamilton, some of the people I look up to, and my mentor and the person I was with, Edwin Moy, who helped me at A&T. Everything's going to happen differently for everybody. And don't take what you learned here to think that that's going to help you accelerate or like it's going to hinder you. Your time will come. And I'm glad that they taught me and I saw their journey. So now that I'm here, I'm excited. And like I said, A&T taught me more and they sustained me for a year and a half than me being in the studio, than me just sitting there on my butt. They did prepare me. It just took a while to get there.
I think that that's an amazing story, because I think that we don't often talk about what life immediately after graduation looks like. Because I think that to a point, we stop at when they graduate, and then we get to the point where it's Terrence J popping out of $1 million car, with Nia Long. It's like we get to that part where we skip the parts where he was working for NASCAR, then he got the call for 106 in Park and saw that they were doing, the auditions. Then he goes and he has to audition twice because he got turned down, and he went to Atlanta and then finally got that shot. Like, I think that we miss those steps. So I think it's important for us to talk about that. So, it's a journey, and I think that's what people forget. And every journey is different. And that's why I try not to use my experience to say, hey, this is how things should be. I try to use my experience as sort of like a learning curve and a learning process, because it honestly is diverse and it is different and it is divergent from other stories, but we all have a unique story, especially in the 21st century with so many tools that you have. And I would say that is what my problem is with the list, because here's my thing. When I look at the list and I look at the majors that they have, it's a couple of things that pop out to me. I think that, especially for communications being number 7, they didn't factor in on-campus experience with your degree. If you're a mass comm major, go interview Miss A&T, go interview Miss Fort Valley, go interview the basketball players, do a show where you preview the season. If it's homecoming, go and cover homecoming. Like, get that content from your YouTube channel. You might go viral. You might grow your YouTube channel. I think that this article from Business Insider, they didn't factor that aspect in. They didn't factor in internships and networking, because if you got a good internship, you might get a job off rip. Because I know a lot of folks that stepped into a job when they graduated because they did so amazing on their internship. I interned 2 years at Aspire, and I learned a lot about media that even today that I still use, from viewership numbers to learning about syndication. I learned that, and it actually does help me out a lot. So, and that networking piece as well, of meeting people at conferences, and going to these different places and meeting decision makers and folks that want to see you win and that'll advise you the right way to make it happen. And then also graduates using the knowledge attained at their HBCU to then go and grow a brand. Like, I don't think they thought about that. You're down in a communication degree specifically for trying to get a job, but there are folks that's making thousands of dollars a month right out of college because they had a vlog that blew up. They vlogged their freshman to their senior year, and on YouTube from Google AdSense, they're making a bunch of money. They were communications majors. So where's the love for them to say, hey, well, it's not as much of a useless major because they learn how to edit in Premiere. They moved from iMovie to Premiere, and now the video's looking real good. Like, hey, they know how to use this DSLR camera that they learned in their mass comm program. So like, there's different things that I think this article didn't factor in. And also the article itself, to me, how is like interior design a useless major? Like, if I majored in interior design, that's very specific. Like, I'm not gonna go and be a budget analyst and like as an interior designer. They're gonna be like, why are you here? Like, oh, I just want to do. Like, no, if you're an interior designer somewhere, I'm gonna go interior design. Like, I'm gonna go do something that fits into what I'm doing. This didn't make sense to have interior design on there. Like English, you can't be a teacher. So I'm going to the corporate world saying I'm an English major. So could you hire me? Like, what's your experience? Like I think that they didn't factor that into the article, and you're looking at it like it's 1990 or 2000, because now you see so many students to have a holistic journey in college. So I honestly think that that's the problem with this list, is like they're looking at it from such a limited view when there's so many dynamic situations going on for a lot of college graduates. And I can assure you, you're not going to have an interior designer and applying to be an analyst at Goldman Sachs. I can assure you of that. But I want to end this the right way. I want us to give our advice to HBCU students that are in media, because we're media folks. So I want you to give advice to media students on how to make it in the industry, and also what you wish that you would have known when you were at A&T.
What I wish I would have known was how to do things that don't just try to stick to one thing, which is kind of what I did. Like, sports is my everything. And I've done sports projects. I've been on the road. I've anchored. I've done sideline reporting and stuff. But don't just limit yourself. Do whatever. And that's what I learned in the past year and a half. I am a good social media manager. I do write good articles. Like, don't limit yourself. yourself. Make sure you go out. So that's one thing I wish I didn't do. But my advice, honestly, is to stick with it. Like Pulse was the one thing that gave me a start and a spark again to keep writing and keep reporting and keep being in that news aspect. Because, you know, when you get out and it doesn't instinctively happen for you, that's hard. A year and a half of waiting is hard. But if you're patient and you keep building your resume and you keep doing what you're doing, it's going to work out for you like how it is now. SiriusXM, new job, got some other stuff on the way. So keep doing what you're doing and don't limit yourself. Communications is not just news, it's everything. And trust me, they all pay very well.
I really want to implore people of two things, like grow your brand when you're on campus. All I can say in my summation when I look back at my experience and what I did when I was at Fort Valley is I grew my brand, and that brand turned into a SiriusXM. That brand turned into all the other ventures that HBCU Pulse is doing. But one thing that I wish I knew back in really, I would say 2017, when I really officially started my mass communications courses, is to take TV news seriously. Like that is the one place now that you can get a job as a reporter, as a digital content producer, as an evening anchor. Like you can do that. And TV news, like that's the way to go. I want to be in radio, and I'm grateful for this opportunity on SiriusXM. But those opportunities before this SiriusXM opportunity were few and far between. You know, so I want to be in radio. I want to be the millennial Tom Joyner, as I call myself, and it was hard to do that in 2019. Then a pandemic and massive layoffs made that even harder. But that's what I would say, and what I would tell any media folks: like grow your brand, and then also don't look past TV news, because that's the one place that you really can go find a job post-graduation, and they want graduates. But we're going to go on and close things out. Arielle, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at @Scrivia__, or go to my website at www.theunexedopinion.weebly.com.
Thank you so much, Arielle. Coming up next, we talk to Revolt TV host and media professional Akilah Ffriend about her journey in media and her advice to HBCU students that want to succeed in media and business post-graduation. So make sure to stay tuned. You're listening to HBCU Pulse Radio on SiriusXM channel 142, HBCU. We'll be right back.
HBCU. They know just what we are. Pulse Radio.
Welcome back to HBCU Pulse Radio here on SiriusXM. We're continuing the conversation about how HBCU students can be successful in the mass communications industry. I'm here right now with media professional Akilah Ffriend. So you have had a very expansive media journey, even though you didn't major in media. You've had such an expansive media journey, just of the places that you worked and the things that you've done. You even worked for the WWE, from what I saw. I was like, wow. Like, as a wrestling fan, I'm like, wow. Like we in there, all right. We in there. We make it happen. So like, you worked so many amazing places. So what I want to know is like, what is it like in that corporate world? Because a lot of folks want to know if like you have to suppress yourself, because like a lot of us, especially now in this generation, we want to be Black unapologetically, and we want to be ourselves, and we don't subscribe to the notion of code switching, because we believe that we shouldn't dial ourselves down because what we are isn't bad. So like, what is it like in the modern day world in a corporate environment at these big, huge Fortune 500 companies?
I'm not a proponent of code switching at all, but I would say part of me and my whole mindset is like, sometimes you have to, or most times you have to assimilate before you can dominate. So I do think at the first thing, it's not going, all Black everything, unless that's what the time and the company calls for. I'm not saying change yourself, but for me, it was a journey to get to the place where I can now be and say, you know what, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And I think society needed to take a journey too, to say, hey, I'm willing to accept you as you are. Because if I started, in 2023, my first job, first corporate job, etc. Go in as your unapologetic self, because I think it's very much well appreciated. This was not the same environment 10 years ago, when I first started. And so at first I was nervous, I felt like, again, not really having anyone to look up to say, oh, you came to corporate America and this is what you did, like, and you look like me and etc. How can I navigate this space? Not really knowing who to ask. So I had to figure it out. And at first, working in the corporate setting, I felt like, I don't think I can do this, until, I think it was around a couple years in, it was actually my interview for Apple TV. where it was my last interview, and I at that point was like wearing wigs. I just did my first big chop, and I was like, you know what? I don't know. I think I need to go in here with this wig because I don't think for this, just for the interview, let's just have the standard look. It's not only a big chop, but my hair was blonde at that point as well. And I was just thinking, you know what? I want them to focus on what I can do, what I can offer, not necessarily my aesthetic. And as I was thinking through that, I said, why would I change? And so I decided to take off my wig before I even showed up. And I did the final interview with my big chop, with my blonde, obviously got the position. But on top of it being just an amazing situation, it was really confirmation to me to say, no, you can show up as your full self in these big corporate environments. Apple is one of the top companies in the world. And for me to be able to do that there meant like I can do that anywhere. And so since then, it was kind of like, no, this is who I need to be at all times. And if anything, this is our value add, not our only value, definitely not, but at least it is a value add that can't be necessarily transferred. You can't teach someone else to be Black, but you are, and you have your own experience, and it's up to you to really show up and show these corporations that, you know, you are valuable. But I do say pace it and really read the room before you take over.
I love that. So let's get into even more advice, you know, for Black women in the corporate world, because we have a lot of Black women, you know, that want to succeed in these environments and that have dreams of making it in the business world with their own businesses or becoming heads of businesses. Like I had a friend at Fort Valley that, you know, she did not want to start a business. And at that time, I did not understand it. However, I understand now that having faces in those places matters, you know, and I'm like, you know what, I think that that's powerful because although, you know, I want to be an entrepreneur and she wanted to be ahead of a Fortune 500 company, like I think that both of us are significant and important. So what is your advice to those Black women that want to get in and succeed in a corporate world and environment?
I love that you had that conversation with your friend, because I would say both are equally important. Not everyone has to have that entrepreneurial bug. Not everyone has it, period, you know, and that's okay. Or if you do have it, maybe your pathway is to be an intrapreneur. So kind of change things within your organization. So my main advice for Black women wanting to succeed in the corporate environment is to really, once, just stay close to that dream. If that's truly it, then that it's okay to follow it, but also understand your why. Like, why is it that you want to succeed? You know, really be okay with that. If it's just because, hey, I want to be on the cover of Forbes one day, fine. If it's more so because you want to see the change that this organization can bring, fine. If you want to see more capital, if you want to bring more people up like you, whatever your reason is, I don't want to necessarily downplay that is or is not enough. It's more so just having a clear understanding, because if you don't know why you're doing something, your strategy is already off kilter, and that means your actions, your movements, the way you interact with others within that corporation would not be effective, because you don't even know what you're doing, and the real people who are also gunning for that position can sniff that out and perhaps, you know, make you question yourself. And so I would definitely say, just one, again, like, know your why, but also the other thing is really just to form some sort of support group inside and outside the organization. It's definitely a long road. You're not going to get there tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. But if that's something that you want, you have the full capacity to get there. But it's harder to do that solo. It's really, you know, I wouldn't say all of your, you know, your friends and your mentorship and your support should come from inside the company. No, because then that's a very insular way of viewing things. You can also gain experiences from your community outside. Like, you know, as you said, you were talking to your friend. That's already a community. Talk to people outside about what you're going through more often. A lot of times I would say, and myself included, I've been in situations where feeling like, you know, no one else would really understand this work life that I'm doing. It's so specific. Never mind. But there's a lot of core things that we as Black women, or we as Black people overall, go through in corporate America that other people can understand. And so reaching out, obviously listening to shows like this, reaching out to different folks and forming a community, some sort of support group, would help you kind of think through things, strategize ways faster, and just get ahead a little bit more.
So let's have the conversation that I love to have, which is about media and about stakeholders, because a lot of us want to be on air. Like, a lot of us have this dream of either being on air or the radio, like how I did, or being on TV. Do you think that maybe it's time, as we move forward, for Black students and Black professionals to look more towards the executive suite or the C-suite versus just being on air?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of how much control do you want kind of out the gate when it comes to your career. I do, and I am a huge proponent of more Black people just being in the corporate executive space. Not necessarily, that doesn't mean if your dream is to be on air, that's your dream, like it's not for me to say don't do it, but I do think it's very important, and it's almost unfortunate when Black folks who have an idea of wanting to be on air, when they finally make that decision to say, oh, actually being an executive producer is pretty interesting, or being, a deal maker is pretty interesting. And it's kind of like at that point, you either have to be the best of the best when it comes to on air to then be able to make that transition, or it's too late overall. And then you're beholden to the folks who actually make those final decisions, AKA the studio heads, et cetera, et cetera. If you yourself was one, you at least for me, I've been able to just see the landscape a little differently. That doesn't mean it's better or worse than folks who decided to go straight out the gate. I mean, we kind of end up at a path that we're supposed to end up anyway, but I wouldn't change the way I did things. And I do encourage other people to do that as well. Like, really look at the business for what it is, because I think people forget that it is a business just like any other business when they decide to say they want to be on air. And that means focusing on all their attention on being byproduct of a business versus being a part of the business themselves. I think it's changing a lot more. You see it, and people maybe need to give themselves more credit. It's changing a lot more in this industry where folks recognize the idea of ownership, period. So you may have your own show that you own. You may have your own YouTube channel that you own. So that's a level of being, a business owner. But I think when you think of the media industry overall and how much of a conglomerate a lot of these entities are becoming, you see a lot of mergers happening between top companies. You got to think to yourself, like, what does that mean in terms of ownership, in terms of decision-making, in terms of opportunities for you to really pursue that dream? And it's not to say that it won't happen, but it means to say you have to get a little more creative about how it happens for you.
It's a little bit different now. I don't know if some folks are willing to go that Terrence J. Rock, because that shows dedication, but there's not even those opportunities anymore.
That's it.
Because of just how media is consolidated now. Like how you said, media is consolidated. You have all these mergers going on because folks are losing a bunch of money and they're trying to spin out of the game because they're in debt and losing billions of dollars. Like, and I think that's what a lot of folks in media don't understand, is that you have to read the room and you have to see the industry, because that says a lot about what your job prospects are going to be. I want to end off with this. Like, where can we find you on social media? And I always ask this, like, how can we support you? Because following on social media ain't support.
You can find me on social media. All of it is the same. It's just my name, at Akilah Ffriend. That's AKILAH Ffriend. Really tapping in, watching the videos, commenting, letting me know what you like, what you want to see.
If you're enjoying this interview with Akilah Ffriend, make sure to head over to HBCU League Pass Plus channel 201, as well as HBCU Pulse YouTube, to watch our full conversation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the show on today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And also make sure to subscribe to HBCU Pulse YouTube, and also watch our TV channel on HBCU League Pass Plus with channel 201. But outside of that, thank you so much for tuning in once again. And as always, we'll see you on the other side, and we'll catch you on the radio next week.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to hbcupulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.